Hi, Dr. Ingegno. How are you?
Oh my God, you got my last name right and everything. That's amazing. I appreciate that. And please just call me Tom.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have you here and to have this conversation. I scoped you out a little bit and did some homework, and the work you're doing is incredible. The things that you share on all the different podcasts that you're on, incredible. And I can't wait for my community to hear from you today.
Thank you. I'm super excited. I know, like, in the pre-call we kind of hit it off. So I'm hopeful that we can give a great show. And you already said I can curse, so I'm already all in.
Everybody knows what you do, but I would love for you to share your story, which led you to why did you become an acupuncturist? Like, why did you,
Yeah.
wow, I see lots of certificates and things.
Most of these are goofy. I mean, they're my real certificates are at the office. I got like 3 ordained ministers things here because I had, $7 and 10 minutes to fill it out online.
That is hilarious.
But yeah, this one, just to have a fun background that isn't too serious
Well, I
is
love
is
it.
what I went there.
I
Yeah.
love it. So tell us what made you choose this route?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I was told, look, you want to help people, you're going to be a medical doctor, right? And that's what I wanted to do. And I think when we look at healthcare as a whole, that is what you tell little kids, right? I don't need to get in what is a nurse practitioner, what's a respiratory tech, all of these ways that we can actually help people with their health. So here I am going, oh, I'm going to be an MD, I'm going to be an MD, I'm going to be an MD. My grandfather was a pharmacist. And this is funny because this memory is so vivid in my head now that I can tell you what type of sneakers he was wearing that day. But for years after he died, I had it blocked out.
Interesting.
And that's not such a hard thing because he always wore the same thing. But when he was in the when he was in the pharmacy, I used to help him out. And it must have been my junior year in high school. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him, and he's standing behind the counter. And back in the day, you had to count out the pills manually, and you had this little tray that whatever you were going to put back into the big bottle was on one side, and whatever you're going to put into the patient's prescription bottle was on the other. So he counted them out. He poured them in. He goes, and this has got to be like 93, 94. He goes, these pills are $5 a piece. This guy has to take 3 a day, probably for the rest of his life. Now, my grandfather's pharmacy was in an area with a large community of like day laborers, people that got on the back of the truck and collected cash at the end of the day. My grandfather used to call him his people's people. I remember I also have a vowel at the end of my names. There was a special place in his heart for them. But
Yeah.
he said, do you know how stressful that is for him and his family? And then he looked at me and he said, there's got to be a better way. I'm hoping you find it, right?
That's incredible.
And the next year, he had a heart attack, and he always said he wanted to die with his lab coat on. He did. Right in his pharmacy, fell over dead.
Uh-huh.
Super traumatic for me. I was very close to him, and I had locked that up until I was in my sophomore year. No lie, I was hitting on a girl, and I was giving her I'm telling you shit I haven't told anybody else. Not my wife doesn't even know this story. So I was hitting on a girl, and we'd been drinking. We went back to her place, and I started giving her a massage, and she goes, "You're really good at this." Well, that fucking memory came into my head like the worst possible time.
How powerful, even though it was the worst possible time.
It was the worst possible time, and I told her about it. She started crying. I'm like, I guess I'm going home, and I went home, and I went back to the dorm, and like that messed me up pretty good too. I cried, and there've been moments of depression in my undergrad, and my junior year, I transferred schools. I ran out of money at Loyola. They kept raising the rates. And I went to NYIT in New York, which was associated with an osteopathic school, right? So you get kind of fast tracked in. You'll be a DO, not an MD. Who cares? No one knows the difference anyway. Right. So there I am sitting in my first semester junior year, straight A there, not even stressing, going like, well, how come Loyola was so hard and this is so easy? And I think I firmly believe now it was because I was getting closer to my goal. That intercession, that winter break, I got a postcard in the mail from an acupuncture school.
Interesting.
And it was for an open house before I went back for spring semester. And I went to that open house and I came home and I said, this is what I want to do. And I applied and enrolled my second semester of my junior year and my first year of grad school. Now, I was able to do this because I had enough credits between AP classes in high school and enough college level credits I took in high school and all my college prereqs. And at the time, the school I had applied to was giving a bachelor's in professional health science. I don't need 2 bachelors. So that junior year, I was carrying like 32 credits and bartending 3 times a week. And I have never been happier. Like, I just loved what I was learning. I loved everything about it. And then, on the 29th of this month, I'll have entered my 25th year in practice. So I'm 15 days away from that now. And it feels amazing, and that's kind of how I got here.
Wow, that's a powerful story.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave out the hitting on a girl part for most audiences.
So before we hopped on here, we talked about how a third of your practice
Yeah.
see people for different mental health challenges, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so normally when I have to explain how we do anything in acupuncture, I got to give a little background of like how acupuncture works, Eastern, Western, right? So classically, everybody's probably seen that acupuncture chart. It's got these meridians that go up and down, and the meridian term actually came from Jesuit priests who were sailors, and they said, "Oh, they look like a globe, these lines up and down, so we're going to call them meridians." In Chinese medicine theory, the idea is that when the body and the mind and the whole being, right, they don't tease out the parts. It's not a ghost in the machine. The ghost is the machine, all that. Right. When something's out of balance, when we have a disease, when we're in distress, when we're stressed out, the first root of that shows up in the spirit. Now, I'm not enlightened yet. I'm trying like hell. So, we end up trying to catch it when those symptoms first start presenting. And that's normally when we have an educated patient, they'll come in and it's easier to balance out the system. Most of the people coming in, they've already broke it. Whatever it is, they hurt their back. They're like, "Hey, man, I'm gun in the mouth. If so depressed, you got to help me." I'm always worried when they come in that level of depression, but as long as they're getting mental health and they seem somewhat stable, we will treat them. But within that, what we do is the idea is that we tease out all these signs and symptoms. We look at every aspect of their life, how they're sleeping, how they're eating, their family relationships, how they're moving their body. Physical examination, we take your pulses, and there's 12 positions on the wrist that we're looking at, which maps out to each one of those 12 channels. We'll press different acupuncture points that indicate function internally, mentally, emotionally, and then we apply needles to help correct that imbalance. Now, that sounds like a lot of pseudoscience. And back in the day when they started studying it, most of the studies were trying to debunk acupuncture. The problem was none of them did, and they all showed some positive efficacy. So then we started shifting gears and looking at how it works. And there's some amazing things that really line up with mental health here, because the number one thing acupuncture does, and this is a buzz term now, and I'm not jumping on the bandwagon. We've been doing this for 5,000 years, is regulation of the autonomic nervous system, right? Get you out of fight or flight, put you into rest and digest, right? And there's plenty of methods that do this beautifully. Try them all, figure out what's best for you. But within that, we can stimulate the vagus nerve, the wandering nerve that comes out of the brain and literally touches every system that we need to function. And normally, when we're talking about anxiety, depression, ADHD, all of these things have multiple signs and symptoms that, if they're not occurring above the neck, no one cares about in the realm of psychology, psychiatry, but make a very strong impact on how we're going to treat you on the acupuncture table.
Yeah, interesting.
And we're looking at, like, sometimes this is thousands of years of case studies and data that's all been added. Somebody wrote all this down, and we'll hear sometimes like, "Well, I do better in the winter." Okay, well, that's the kidney season. Are they stronger here? Are they weaker there? And then we go look at that meridian and they go, "Oh, well, I'm just so fearful." Oh, well, that's the emotion of the kidneys, right? And we start to put together this bigger picture of that person laying on our table than, "I'm here because I'm sad." Right. And it's important to know why you're there,
Yeah.
but how you're functioning across all the systems is very important. The other things that happen that are so helpful in the realm of mental health, when you get acupuncture, after we create this shift, after we get into that rest and digest, if we hook you up to an ECG, we will see that your brainwave activity looks like deep sleep meditation brainwaves. right? You're entering that reset mode. How do I repair myself? I actually am an avid meditator, and I use the Muse system. I had the honor of talking to the co-founder twice, and I said, "Hey, this is supposed to happen in an acupuncture treatment. I'm going to bring my unit in and start recording people's brainwaves. I haven't done it yet." And she goes, "Please send my company the data. We'd love to see that." So I'm super excited to actually do that. I have another headband on the way, so I don't have to give up my personal one. But one more thing that happens: regulation and stimulation when necessary, right? Serotonin and dopamine do this little dance. Too much one, too little of the other. I got anxiety, I got depression. You probably know that better than I do. That's not my world, but we still are well aware of it. We know that oxytocin, the bonding chemical, is released during acupuncture. And then in the 90s, one of the greatest effects, and I'm a big fan of this one because everyone leaves feeling a little, they go like, I feel a little high. Oh, here's why. 1991, we discovered the endocannabinoid system. Endo meaning internal, cannabinoid coming from cannabis. And we have these receptors. We have two different types. We have some that regulate the immune system function. We light up those as well. But the CB1 receptors are on our nervous system. They're in our brain. They're all on our sensory and motor nerves. When we do acupuncture, we create a couple of different endocannabinoids. The one that's been most researched, other than having this long chemical name, is also called anandamide. Ananda is the Sanskrit word for bliss. This is the bliss molecule. So not only can we help regulate those longer term serotonin dopamine type brain waves, we give you a little bit of bliss. It gives you a little bit of a break when you leave the treatment. A lot of people will sit in our waiting area. A lot of people go sit in their car and just kind of take a couple of deep breaths before they go home. And that's a beautiful thing. We love playing that up. We make our rooms, cozy and appealing, nice soft music in there because hell, if we can turn that effect up, I want to.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. So let's say you have somebody who is saying, I'm at the verge of attempting suicide. I'm so depressed. How would you go about? So I know you can't say, I would do this, this, and this because it's very,
It's so unique and it's individualized to that person.
but can you give us a little bit of an idea of
Yeah.
what that might look like? And
Yeah. I
okay.
think first of all, we have to correctly assess the risk. Are they actually going to do it? Are they thinking about it? Do I need to call somebody and have somebody picked up? If knock on wood, in almost 25 years of practice, we haven't had that happen. We have had some people that have checked themselves into a mental health facility and they made the right call. We always want to make sure that they are getting some kind of talk therapy, not necessarily medication. I think there's a time and a place for that, but if they're stable enough to not need it, okay, fine. When we treat them, we are very clear. We do not say this is a magic bullet. We're not going to treat you once and this is going to go away. This is a therapy, just like counseling, just like, any other service that you need to go to repeatedly to see the results. Within that, and he just released a book probably about 5 years ago saying 50 years in practice. So he's double me, an older man in Japan, Shudo Denmei, who is just a living legend in the field, talking about depression and treatment of depression. And he said, we have to watch because if our treatments are effective and they're getting better and better, we have to make sure that they don't backtrack or backslide, right? They feel good. They're starting to feel better. They're starting to come out of their shell. They're kind of starting to normalize. And then some event might bump them, and knock them down. And he's worried about that spiral setting them into emotion that they shouldn't be in. So we always have to monitor. We always have to check in. And it really depends on the severity. I mean, certainly right now we can pick anything globally, locally, in the States to give us anxiety and depression. We all need somebody to kind of check us, to help us, to kind of pick us up. And sometimes that's friends and family, and sometimes that's professionals. But within it, as people are getting better and better, the goal is to start tapering them off the treatments, which sounds crazy, right? That's not
Yeah.
how you run a business.
Well, but also, no, it's not business, but
Yeah.
kind of the point when you get to the root of things. But I would think you would want to get acupuncture forever, or at least
We, you know, I knock on wood again. I moved to Baltimore almost 20 years ago, and I have some patients that have been with me 15, 18 years. I mean, they've been with me for 4 moves. And it's funny because one of the expressions in one of our acupuncture texts, one of our classic sayings that has meant more to me the longer I've done this is acupuncture is an expression of humanity. Right. I've had other acupuncturists that are like, they'll shrug when you say that, but I really think that's the heart. It's the interaction of you and that patient. It's the interaction of you and that society. It's the interaction of that patient and the society and all of those relationships that you have, both of you. And the stronger those are, the healthier those are. I have patients that I see consistently for routine care. You know, it might be once a month, it might be once a quarter. Some people come every other week and they've got no particular complaints because they know that will keep them up and running.
correct.
With the
Live.
with the anxiety and the depression, sometimes, like you'll start seeing accountants and stuff come in, early January, February. Why? It's about to be tax season. Or we have people that have, sad seasonal acquired depression and they go, look, time change is coming. The days are getting shorter. I'm coming in now. Okay, great. I mean, and it's no different than somebody who has seasonal allergies. But that's a great thing, right? They're getting what they need. They're preemptively taking control of something.
That's how I am with my mental health. I'm very proactive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like everybody should be. I have a counselor I check in with and I'm like, "Hey man, I got nothing to talk about, but while we're here, let me see if I can dig something up."
Right. So typically before you start working on a taper off process, are we talking about 3 months, 6 months? Again, I know it's very hard to say, but
My mentor used to use a lot of expressions, and this wasn't one of my favorite, but he said it all the time, so I'm going to use it. And he said, "How long is a piece of string?" Right? And he said, "Well, and it's how long is it cut to? I mean, that doesn't make any sense." But what he was getting at is like it comes down to a lot of your innate healing potential. It comes down to a lot of what external outside things are happening between treatments, right? You may have a death in the family, somebody close to you, and that's going to put you down, a bit, right? You're going to be depressed, but that might be finite. Are you going to work and getting screamed at by your boss every day is a very different situation. Now, from the outside, I'm like, tell that dude to fuck off and quit, but it's not that easy. I'm self-employed. If something goes wrong, I'm the fucking asshole. I'm not, it's not like, oh, I screwed this up, all right, and then you feel bad about yourself. But when you're getting screamed at work, you can't just turn around and tell somebody to fuck off. So, how do we cope? What are we doing week to week just to keep you together? And sometimes that's it. So that's, before we get to tapering, one, we have to show some stability and improvement. And it's not, oh, I saw you once a week for a month and now let's go to once every 2 weeks. It's what do you feel comfortable with? It's a conversation. This is another application of that acupuncture is the expression of humanity. Andrea, how you feeling? You feeling real strong? Do you want to try it? And you go, nope, I got a family function next week. My family's a big trigger for me. I might want to double up. Okay. And it's a conversation to have better outcomes is really what it's about.
yeah, I want to point this out for everybody listening because this is a theme with many different guests that I have on, right? Different practitioners doing different types of things, even people with their own personal testimonies of healing. Healing is really hard to do in a vacuum. You live a whole life. And so if you want to heal, right, or get to the root of things, you have to really take a serious assessment of your whole life and the different things affecting your mental health, or if you have an autoimmune or whatever it is. And you can't just do this thing over here and expect everything else to fall into place. There's usually you're doing multiple things, right? Or you're putting boundaries, or you're changing your diet, or you're going to bed earlier with your devices put away and your internet turned off, right? There's things that have to happen. We live in a time where we were never supposed to live like this, right? Or we weren't we weren't designed to live the way we're living, and humanity's suffering from that. And this is where a lot of our ailments and our mental health challenges come from. And again, this is coming up where it's like, well, what's going on outside of the acupuncture room, right? Yes, acupuncture is really powerful, but there's many other things that could be happening that people have to address.
I love that you put it that way because I say something very similar. We've been humans in this type of body, this kind of brain for God. I think it's something like 40,000 years. Might even be. I didn't do so well in the anthropology class, but but within that, we've never been different. It's the external stimuli, right? So
Yes.
I'm not saying people have to give up their iPhone. I'm not saying people should walk out of their office and quit. Well, maybe, but within that, this technology is amazing. We're having this conversation coast to coast right now, and we're crystal clear. We can see each other. We can emote. That's amazing. But we're not supposed to sit here for 8 hours a day. And the more we do that, the more we get roped into jobs and technologies. And a lot of this we've done damage to ourselves. And some of it's been for the sake of profit, right? Now we got to worry about microplastics. And you're like, yeah, and all of these things to advance civilization have not necessarily advanced with the concept of a whole human health in the center.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've advanced civilization, but we have definitely created a massive decline in our health.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that brings me to asking you a little bit about Western versus Eastern,
Yeah.
and why you even said, pseudoscience, like it sounds like pseudoscience or whatever, because it's like pseudoscience is it's been a term created to be a weapon.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know that we weaponize everything.
Well,
I mean, and specifically pseudoscience. It's always funny to me because, like, the one social media platform, if we can even call it a social media platform, that I've not deleted off my phone is Reddit, because I can control the groups I'm in and what I'm reading. And there's a group called Self-Aware Wolves, which is kind of funny, right? And they point out when people are like close to getting the point. And the other day they were talking about alternative medicine, right? So they're all bashing it. And I'm realizing, like, I'm not even going to comment because they'll lay into me. And I know for a fact they're not sitting on PubMed. They're not, like, I've been on PubMed more this week than they probably ever have. But within that, this idea that if you can't study it the same way as you can in a vacuum, as you said before, which is not how humans work anyway, right? So when we do big studies, right, they're great. They give us some guidelines. If n equals a million, oh my God, that's amazing. It's a good study. We know the results. But if you're that million and one person that takes that drug and doesn't get the result, or dies, or has a negative effect, what do you care about everybody else in that case, right? Like, how does that help you? It doesn't. It hurts you. So when we practice and practice at the highest level, we want to individualize that, right? And we're going to use the knowledge from those big studies, but that may not be right. We're seeing this evolution with epigenetic knowledge. So we can say, oh, no, this is the wrong drug for somebody, or, hey, this is the wrong lifestyle for somebody. It's always funny to me because even functional medicine, which is starting to become a very big movement, has its roots in Chinese medicine, with the concept of how far back can I go? Can I get to the source of this dysfunction? And when we talk epigenetics, it's literally, oh, that switch went on, it wasn't supposed to go on, or that switch isn't on. How do we switch that on? Right. And that's on this really small scale. But that's the same root as Chinese medicine. And when I started out, there was this kind of concept with some of the older people in my program. I went to a school that this was a career change for people. So the average age of a student was 35, and I think I entered at 20, right? And then I was like this, just like this chubby kid that just didn't, like, was like embarrassed and shy of everything. And now it's like, no, I'm going to talk. You guys shut up. But within that, it did have this kind of like, oh, we're trying to buck the system. And now, I'm in Baltimore. I've lectured at University of Maryland to their med students, their integrated medicine program. I've lectured to Johns Hopkins medical students. It's a very different game.
yeah.
One question one of those students asked me was, how can I get my patients on your table so I don't have to see them for things that could be sidestepped? Right. And that's a radical shift.
Yeah. I mean, I am really hopeful because I do feel, at least from my own experience as a patient, right, or a client, that we're starting to see a shift in newer practitioners and different type of Western medicine practitioners who really want to fold in alternative medicine and really do understand that Western medicine and or like that very standardized way that you approach somebody doesn't work long term, right? It's not actually healing anything. And so it does make me hopeful. It's just hard because there's a lot of narratives out there that are so, they saturate everything, right? And it's, people get confused and they are scared to trust themselves. Like, no, I really feel that I should go explore other modalities, or I really feel, my friend told me about this, but it's like, but my doctor says this, or
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
top therapist says this, right? And that's where I get really fired up, because it's like you have to learn to trust yourself and explore, and it's hard for people when there is a controlling, a mainly controlling narrative, right?
Yeah, it is. And that's the other thing. Even with people looking, there's too much to sift through, right? And what is actually BS? What is actually going to hurt you? What is actually safe, right? That's hard for people in
It,
healthcare to differentiate, right? And we're all coming into it with our own biases and things like that. So to look at things objectively and go, I can do this. I think it's okay. How safe is it? And trusting your gut when you've been told your whole life the guy with the lab coat on is going to tell you what to do. That's even something to overcome. I noticed the shift. I'm a Gen Xer. You look like a younger millennial. So I've
as
noticed.
a millennial, I just have a really good skincare routine.
Okay, all right. I just I they started calling me a Zennial, and I was like, I fucking hate that term. And then they explained it, and I'm like, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
But within that, I think there's a shift. And I think, especially with the Gen Xers, they looked at how, like, I can look at my parents now and knock on wood, they're pretty healthy. But the generation before them, they might have lived a long time, but like, God damn it. Like, who wants to exist like that in some cases? So I think with every generation that goes by, and now certainly I'm seeing studies where people are getting cancers younger and younger, and that's environmental issues. And we're all a little bit more concerned with that. And, on one hand, that's a bigger stressor. On another hand, the awareness, the attention brought to it, hopefully will allow us to make better health choices through our whole life. Understanding how important the gut health is to mental health, to physical health, to aging, right? You start focusing on those things. And, none of this is a sprint. This isn't like, hey, I took those probiotics and my gut is healed. It's like, how do I reduce inflammation? How do I get rid of the leaky gut? How do I kill off the small intestinal bacteria that shouldn't be there? And then how do I repopulate? How do I recoat the lining? How do I reduce that inflammation? Right? That could be 6 months, a year for some people. But that investment, slow over time, is like going to the gym, right? You're not going to see the results from running on the treadmill for 15 minutes. But 6 months of a workout plan, it's not sexy, it's not necessarily fun. You see those changes.
Absolutely. Well, my hope is that not only will people start to really catch on and take their power back with all of this, but also just practitioners really seeing the writing on the wall and turning the ship with the interventions and things like that. I want to go back to acupuncture, and I want to go back to, why was it called pseudoscience?
Well, go ahead. I'll let you finish the question first.
Let's talk about the research on it, right? And maybe it's different research than research that we're told is the only kind of research. But I'd love to hear, because I want my audience and my community to understand that pseudoscience is a weaponized word, and it doesn't always mean something bad. Like, you need to look into it yourself. So can we talk about that just a
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I think we have to give a nod to cultural appropriation too here. And part of it was when it came here. And I've never had an Asian teacher that has dressed it up in kind of this new agey kind of verbiage, and you get the everything aligned and flowing. It was always very practical to them.
Yeah.
And somehow, when it came here, it got lumped in with New Age practice, right? And, burning patchouli and grass skirts and tie dye and all that shit, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Play your Grateful Dead records. I'm fine with it. But it was looked at as that can't possibly work. How does pricking someone's skin do anything?
Yeah.
But it was this, once again, very reductionist idea of like, it's got to be that because this is not science. And we know Western medicine, and Western medicine is the best. And then, well, this came from ancient Greek, Hippocrates, right? And like, well, he was talking about humors and bleeding people. You're not bashing that to the same intensity. It's like you guys are wearing, and yeah, we can call it an anti-Asian sentiment and all those things. So the first studies that were done in the Western universe, and this is another bias about research, if it's not published in English, it's looked down upon. Yeah, so if you look at a lot of the big studies that are coming even from Europe where English isn't the primary language, they're all published in English, right? So Germany does great research. Israel does some pretty good research, but they're published in English. Why is that? Because they want credibility. So the Chinese don't know what they're doing. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
They're schooling us in every measurement, and their research, their scientific method is just as valid as ours. Now, the problem I think that happens is you can't just do a double-blind placebo-controlled study with acupuncture. I think we were talking beforehand in 2012, they kind of put this to rest. They were showing, right? So if you were designing a study, and let's say we were treating knee pain, they would have the true acupuncture points, and then they'd have sham acupuncture points. So they would have somebody mark the locations and another person put those needles in. Now, this wasn't double blind anyway, because the person putting the needles in saw where they were going to put the needles. It also wasn't good quality because here's if we have the knee, the points are in and around the knee, and then the sham point might be a half an inch further away. Well,
Yeah.
it's still near the knee. And we know one of the methods of action for acupuncture is increasing circulation. Affectionately in Japan, they'll call it an artificial splinter. It means I put the needle in, your body goes, hey, that shouldn't be there. And it sends blood to that area.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even if it's below the knee, it's got to come off the main torso. It's got to get through the knee to get down there. So we're still increasing effect. Now, the other type of placebo they were doing, which was trying to make it more blind. Those bunion pads where it's like a raised circle?
Yeah.
And then what they would do is they'd put that over the acupuncture point or the sham acupuncture point, and they'd cover it with a piece of medical tape. Then they would have the practitioner pick up some needles and put the needle in. Now, some of the practitioners had real needles, and some of them had quote unquote sham needles, which was like a stage blade with like here's the blade of the knee, the knife or whatever it is, and when you press it against the patient or the person you're stabbing on stage, it would fall in. Same thing with these needles. Now, the problem was the tip would still press on the patient. Why? They wanted the patient to feel something, so it was more blind. Now, I will tell you as a practitioner, I'm pretty sure I could sense which ones were actually going in. There's a distinct tissue difference from sitting on the surface and actually penetrating. And the patient would probably feel more of a pinch with it sitting on. But you're still stimulating the surface of the tissue. This is why acupressure works. This is why massage works. We're still stimulating that tissue. So it makes perfect sense that when they were doing studies, they're like, well, the real acupuncture outperformed the sham, but not by that much. Well, your study design sucked.
Yeah.
And in 2012, they really showed that. And what they started doing in 2012 were standard of care comparisons. And acupuncture was blowing these studies out of the water. So they do headaches, right? And they do, okay, what's the normal route? Oh, we're going to give you an NSAID. We're going to give you Advil, Aleve, Tylenol, whatever it is. Acupuncture outperformed all that. Acupuncture outperformed migraine medicines. Acupuncture outperformed a lot of physical therapy, right? And we don't want to say that because the physical therapy lobby is really big. Yeah, so right now, as we're sitting in the Cochrane database, which is one of like PubMed, Cochrane database is a couple other places where we go to get our research, and that's digestible for practitioners. They can go on there and read studies. The Cochrane database has more systematic reviews, which are on a specific topic The modality would be acupuncture and the treatment of this. And it's looking at all the research on that particular so acupuncture migraines could be one or many systematic reviews where they look at the research as it's changing. We have more systematic reviews in that Cochrane database than physical therapy and chiropractic combined. And a huge chunk of that was trying to disprove acupuncture, and they couldn't. In fact, they kept going, shit, there's something here. But it can't be the chi. It can't be these made up meridians. They don't exist, right? And we can look at all of these functions. We can see that, yes, we're regulating the autonomic nervous system. Yes, we're sending more blood to the gut. Yes, we're slowing the heart rate. Yes, we're causing an immune system response, but they can't tell you how. And then this is where practitioners like me go, yeah, it's the chi. You guys just don't, it's not something that you can measure, right? And I don't believe it's this magical thing you can shoot out of your body, but in a very practical physics kind of way.
Right.
If we talk about energy, practical physical energy has kinetic energy. Does your body have the ability to do what it needs to do when it needs to? Sorry, kinetic is actually doing the thing when it's supposed to. Potential, can it do it if it needs to? It doesn't do all, your body doesn't do everything all at once, but can it perform those functions when it has to? And if that isn't there, it either doesn't have enough energy, the energy's stuck somewhere, or it's being routed somewhere else, right? So those are the three things that we correct with our acupuncture needles and some other modalities too, but that's another hour-long conversation we don't need to get into right now.
Well, I think that it's almost like mainstream medicine is saying if we can't see it, touch it, feel it, or say that we can 100% measure it or control it, then it's not real.
Well, we still see it happening today, less so now, even with women's health issues. And I'm going to single them out because most studies are on a college age white male, which kind of makes it hard to understand women's health, even for physicians. Within that, for a long time, if you came in complaining of PMS, or now we call it PMDD, right? And it's severe cases, you were told that there's nothing physically wrong with you. It's all in your head. You were given Wellbutrin. What is Wellbutrin? It's an SSRI. It kind of levels you out mentally. You still have the symptoms, but you just don't care as much. It was shut me up and get me out of here, right? And we do that so often. If you go for every test, and we have a laundry list of patients that fall into this. They've tried everything. Something's not right. Here's what I'm feeling. It could be a very real physical sensation to them. They're told it's in your head. And we're failing people. We're failing people because we're not looking at things from a functional medicine standpoint, because we're not looking at the whole body. You know, the number of times people have come in and they have like some headache, some sinus congestion, and it turns out it's their damn tooth. They've got an abscess.
Mhm.
It's insane to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really problematic. It's really hard. I love this discussion. So, how would somebody go about finding, I mean, obviously they can Google, but finding the right practitioner?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where we are a little bit wacky. There isn't one way to do acupuncture, right? At the end of the day, somebody is laying on the table, somebody is getting needles put in them. Hopefully it's the patient. But within that, there's a lot of different schools of thought, right? So most of us are practicing what I would call a neoclassical system. Given the political climate in the 90s post World War II, acupuncture had spread all over Asia, and in some cases had even made it to the West. But in the 90s, there was this kind of return to classic movements in places like Korea, Japan, China, of course, and then other places. Vietnam and France and Vietnam have had a long intertwined history, so it made it to Europe that way. There's a lot of different schools of thought, and a lot of that makes for us having public arguments as practitioners, which doesn't unify the field well. And somebody will call somebody else an idiot, not knowing anything about the system they're talking about. Fortunately, the school I went to, my mentor had studied a lot of different systems, and it was taught that this is a very big animal. And as long as you know the system and you can function within that system, you'll get good results. So a lot of it, first thing I tell people, make sure they're a licensed acupuncturist. There's only a couple of states in this country where they don't have to be licensed. They still probably have some national certifications. I do not like when other healthcare professionals pick up acupuncture needles. whether they have certification in their state, whether or not they're doing some BS calling it dry needling. It's all acupuncture. It's undertrained acupuncture. Chiropractors would get real pissed off if I started adjusting people, which is part of Chinese medicine too. We had it before they did, but they would come after my license. But they can all pick up needles and do whatever they want, call it something other than acupuncture, and now they're in the clear. So why not be the best at what you do and keep your eyes on your own work? That is a personal axe I have to grind, but I know a lot of people that are doing lower quality acupuncture. They're not licensed. The NCCAOM is our national accreditation group. Personally, I don't know if they help or they hurt, but that's one certification that you can tell this person has passed the national boards, and that's another feather in somebody's cap. And then experience. You should be able to call and set up some kind of a consultation. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's $15 to $50 depending on the practitioner. But meet them, talk to them, see if your values align with them. Some people don't like me because I talk too much. I'm too loud. I want to tell you why things. Some people just want to lay down and have it happen to them, and that's fine too. And speaking of that bias, some people don't want to see me because I'm not Asian. And then on the other hand of that, some people are go like, I don't want to see an Asian because I don't know if they'll understand me. And I'm like, you understand that there's Asians that have been here longer than my family's been here. That is also problematic, but you're
Wild.
it is so crazy. I had a guy, one of my long-term patients, he went to his doctor and he goes, well, that's great, you're getting acupuncture. He goes, you should see our guy, he's Chinese. And I was like, what? But like, what? He didn't go into like his resume. He didn't talk about his experience and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's insanity.
It is. It is. That's something I say regularly about whatever is like you need to find the right practitioner, and definitely they need to have the license or the certifications, and depending on the modality, like this needs to be their only thing, right? That they that
Well,
they
East Asian medicine is a huge animal too. So there's a lot of things that we do that's in that acupuncture license, whether it's Chinese herbal medicine, whether it's body work, whether acupuncture, moxa, cupping, all of those things should be part and parcel to what people are doing. Gua sha is another technique. And I'm sure if you gave me 5 minutes, I'd list off a whole bunch of others that are lesser known. But within that, we really want to make sure that the person is trained, that they're applying the techniques appropriately for that patient in front of them.
I love that. One thing that stood out to me though that you were saying is there's different ways of doing it that are effective. And that tells me that you all practice without this one size fits all.
And you can't. And they do that in mental health too,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I think that's so good. Well, I mean, there is some one size fits all in mental health, and then there's some not, but it depends on so like my
Uh-huh.
education is very much we don't diagnose. We only do it because we have to for insurance. It's a systemic approach. It's a very holistic approach. I'm a family therapist, so my point of view is very different than the majority of mental.
But even within that, that's what I'm talking about. I talked with a social worker once, a LCSW, who came in and she goes, "Oh, it's like the dodo effect or the dodo verdict." And I was like, "What the hell is that?" So she told me this story. Okay, in Alice in Wonderland, there was a race and the dodo was the judge. The dodo wasn't paying attention. By the time he turned back around, everybody had crossed the finish line. And
Mhm.
he basically declared everyone the winner because he couldn't tell who crossed first. And when it's used in mental health, it seems that outcomes are more driven by somebody actually getting therapy versus not. So
Yeah.
whether it was CBT, DPT, all of these different methods, Freudian, as long as they were had somebody to talk to, they had better outcomes than people that didn't. I mean, that makes sense. And in some cases, that's true with acupuncture too. As long as the person is trained, they're doing what they can within that system that they know and they practice, they get good outcomes, which is really maddening because you'll watch some people, and this still happens every once in a while. I'll talk to a friend and they'll be like, oh, I do this point for that. Right. Like that's really reductionist. That's not how we talk. But I'll go and I'll use that point the next time I see that and it doesn't work for me. Why? Because I don't understand the whole system around it, And it's like, no, that's just unless you teach me why that happens and how to use the whole system, I'm just piecemealing stuff and it's messy, it's sloppy, it's not as good.
Love that. So, okay, one last thing
Sure,
I
sure,
want
sure, sure.
you before we wrap up, because I want to respect your time,
You're
is
fine.
how can somebody support themselves at home with
Yeah,
any
yeah.
kind of body work, right? I know that you have a book on cupping, which I'd love for you to plug
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah, you got it.
What are some things that people can do, right, in between their acupuncture appointments or just in general? Like, I know I do a lot of stuff for myself, but I'd be curious to hear what you recommend.
And self-care is really important, right? And hopefully that'll get you over most of the minor stuff. People are starting to pick up gua sha tools, scraping, right? I love that. It's more than just the facial technique, and in fact the facial thing came much later. These modalities that were done in homes that go back throughout history are really kind of amazing, and they're starting to see some time in the limelight because there is some research on them. There's interest in how people can take care of themselves, and there's this whole category that affectionately gets referred to as grandma's medicine. And cupping is one of those big things. Cupping started as folk medicine. We know it's at least 5,000 years old. The first record we have of it comes from the Ebers Papyrus in Egypt in 1515 BC. And we're not even sure where it came from. Was it Greece? Was it Egypt? Was it Persia? Not sure, but it went all over the world. And whoever the family healer was the one that did that. And a lot of times that was grandma. I was teaching in Manhattan, and I was teaching a clinical skills class. And every time we got to cupping, all of the foreign students, didn't matter what country, grandma used to do that all the time. Grandma did that to me when growing up, and now we're seeing clinical research on how great it is, especially for the musculoskeletal stuff, but for respiratory health, digestive health. And we're at this time where traditionally you do it with fire. You use fire to suck the air burn the oxygen out of a cup and create a vacuum. And you were using things like glass jars or drinking glasses even at home. And that adds an element of danger because you could possibly burn somebody, you could break the glass. Now we have all these tools and techniques that you can buy on eBay, Amazon, whatever your online dealer, or if you have a Chinese Asian grocery store nearby, you'll find them in the healthcare section. Plastic cups with pumps, silicone cups that you literally press onto the body. I love those because they stack like nesting dolls, and you can throw them in your bag. They're like $20 online, and you have something cheap, effective that you can actually pick up and learn relatively quickly. So even the book I wrote is called The Cupping Book. I tried to be as direct as possible. The website's thecuppingbook.com if you want to see more about it. But this book is only 131 pages. I wanted to show you what's available on the market, give you some ideas, tell you how to do it safely, tell you where to treat, and tell you what to look for and what to avoid. And I wanted it to be like grandma told you, not like this was a doctor with 25 years experience. What do you need to be effective? What do you need to take care of your family, your friends, your kids, and get you up and running as quick as possible? So between the book and the cups, you read the book, you buy some cups, and now you have a lifetime technique that you can apply to your family and friends.
Yeah, my husband does cupping on himself, and I mean, he absolutely loves it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's great too. The silicone cups, the plastic cups are more shapes and sizes where, the glass jars, they've got a good size selection, but you can't really get them on smaller parts of your body like your forearms. And having these different cups that kind of contour to your body shape also allows you to have more access to different areas.
I love it. Okay, so are there any final thoughts that you would share with somebody who has maybe never tried
Yeah,
acupuncture?
I think don't look at it as I'm going to acupuncture for this. That condition might drive you in. Back pain is still probably the number one reason people show up at our doorstep globally. But bring all your complaints, all your concerns, no matter how weird it is, it could give us some insight to your whole being health, right? And what we tend to notice is a lot of times the thing that brought them in, if it's severe enough, it'll start easing up, but other symptoms that you didn't even know about will start to get better, and you'll go like, oh, I've been sleeping really good since I started acupuncture. Or, hey, I've noticed I'm not waking up and rushing to the bathroom every morning. So you'll see different areas of your life improving. Most practitioners will ask you like 10,000 questions. My intake's really long, so I don't have to ask you all of them. But within that, it's giving us insight to how your whole body works. So be open to that process, and don't think anything is small. If it's important to you, it could be a defining moment for us in our diagnostics.
Yeah, if it's important to you, it's important for your practitioner to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where can people find you if they
So CharmCityIntegrative.com. Charm City is the happy nickname for Baltimore. You can find out about me. I lecture, I consult, I do a lot of different things besides practicing. Practicing is still my my baby, but I enjoy doing things like this. So if anybody wants to book me to talk, or just reach out, please, if you have any questions.
And all of his links will be put in the show notes, you guys, including the book. So I'm really excited for this. Thank you so much for just educate. I learned so much. I've never done acupuncture, and I'm going to go find somebody.
Give it a try. You're on the West Coast. You have an abundance of
I do.
quality
Yes,
practitioners.
I do. And so I'm really pumped for this episode to come out and for people to really understand what's at their fingertips if they've never done this before. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
This was a great interview, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me.